What is going on, everybody? It is your boy Nothing But Skills, and today I'm bringing you guys another Division 2 build. And today's video is going to be talking about a build that you can use on almost every weapon in the game, and the build that I think will be meta going forward because of a lot of the nerfs coming to the game. And the great thing about this actually works on almost every type of build setup you want to do. So if you want to do one for LMG, SMG, ARs, you can work all of them with the same setup that I'm doing right now. The issue I have with SMGs is when you do go normalize, they get normalized really low. So even with the extra damage you get from the backpack, it's not enough to compensate for what you're losing. So that is the one build that I don't feel does as well. But with the buff to ARs coming in the next patch, I feel that ARs are going to take their step into that meta build. So you'll probably see more builds with ARs, and that's what I'm excited for because I'm an AR fan and I love using ARs in most shooters. So finally being able to use an AR instead of an LMG and dominate is what I'm going for. Now with this build, you can either use AK or you can use the P416. I personally like the P416 because of the rate of fire, but the AK still does really well, especially if you can get Allegro on there. So the one that I'm using gives me 20.3k, the RPM is 825, and then has Optimus. Weapon damage is increased by 3% for every 10% ammo missing from the magazine. So that's why Optimus is still pretty good. And until we see if they nerf it or not in the next patch, it's still going to be the talent for your ARs. Now Allegro is definitely something you want to get on all your weapons. 10% rate of fire. That means you're going to get more bullets on target. That means the more damage, more DPS per second. And then the bottom talent is greased, while holster weapon swap speed is increased by 10%. The fact is I don't use my secondary, so this talent really isn't good for me. But I do have an AK that has the same rolls, but the damage roll is just as good as my P416. So I prefer using my P416. So I'm using a Pro Red Dot sight with 5% stability, an angle grip with 10% stability, and then a suppressor with 20% stability, negative 10% optimal range. And then if you don't want to run a sight with stability, you can put accuracy on the sight. And then of course for the magazine, I'm running a plus 10 round magazine. Now I have heard there is a magazine that gives you 20 rounds, plus 20 rounds, negative 10% reload speed. I haven't been able to get that. If any of you guys have gotten that magazine, let me know, or I'm just gonna say it's a myth. But if somebody's gotten it in the chat, let me know down in the description box. Now for my secondary, I am running the Chatterbox, and it's just for the bottom talent, so you never swap to use this. While holster, reloading your weapon within 5 seconds after getting a kill gives you that 20% rate of fire. And then if you add that to the rate of fire you already have on the P416, you can put out a lot of damage. So for your secondary, you're not really too focused on it. Now for your pistol, always try to find a bottom talent that has stop, drop, and roll. I feel like that's the best talent to have, just for the fact that if you do get caught on fire, you can roll and you can get rid of that fire. So let's get into the gear, guys. The first thing you're going to notice, I'm running 241,000 armor, 52,000 health. My skill power is a little low at 1385 because I need to roll a couple pieces on here. And as I break down the gear set, I'll let you know. We're running 4 offensive, 8 defensive, and 7 skill power. Now the perfect roll for this, honestly, would be 3 offensive, 11 defensive, and 7 skill power. And you can do that because I do have that done on my LMG build. So for the mask, I'm running a Gilligar mask. I feel like Gilligar gives you some really good rolls, and that's why a lot of times we have to add them to our builds. But not only that, at least have one piece of Gilligar for that 5% total armor. Now for the attributes, I have hazard protection, which I would like to have health here instead. And then I have cooldown reduction, which I would like to have skill power. So I can still roll one talent on here. And I feel that putting skill power on here is going to benefit me a little bit more because I'll get more benefits out of my mods. Now for the talent on here, I have spotter, 10% weapon damage to pulse enemies. Now this is getting a buff in the update. It's going up to 20%. So it's going to be really key that if you guys are trying to run a 7 skill build, you add this on there, just because when you pulse, imagine that every time you pulse, you're going to get that 20% extra damage to the pulse enemies. And then when that goes on cooldown, we'll get 25% damage, and I'll show you that in just a second. Now this is going to require you to have 5 skill power or more, and what we're shooting for is 7 skill power or more on this build. Now you also want to get a mask that has a utility mod because that's going to help you hit that 7 skill power. So for the mask, I went for 1 blue, 1 yellow, so 1 defense, 1 skill, and then I wanted a utility mod that's going to give me another yellow. So I get 2 and 1 for this part of the build. Now for the chest, this is something that might change in the future, but I'm going with the Fenris chest. This is going to give me 10% assault rifle damage. The attributes I went with are 2 offensive, so I have crit chance, headshot damage, and health. I would like to get rid of the crit chance, and then I would put weapon damage on here, but I don't want to mess with this chest just yet, because if Berserk gets nerfed like they say it's going to, I need to swap that out. So Berserk gives you 10% weapon damage for every 10% armor you're missing. Now, if Berserk does get nerfed, there are a couple talents you can run: Unstoppable, Bloodsucker, both really good talents that you can add to this build and still feel the benefit of having it. But as of right now, with Berserk not being nerfed, I'm still running that. But as soon as the update comes out and as soon as they confirm that Berserk is going to be at 10 offensive, there's no way I'll be able to run it on this build. So that is just something I have to change. So that's why I don't want to mess with this chest just yet, because I like the rolls that I have on here. I hit my numbers. But as I said before, if you want to get the perfect roll, you can get rid of that crit chance and put weapon damage. Now I recommend getting 10% armor hardened on your chest and your backpack, and that's going to help you get that max armor. The next thing I was shooting for was having a utility mod on my chest, because that gets me closer to getting to that 7 skill power. Those are small things you have to pay attention to. If you have no skill rolls on your chest, at least you want to have utility mod on your chest, so that way you can still get that 1 skill power roll, because there are going to be certain pieces that you have to have at least 1 skill power roll, so that way you can hit 7 skill power. The next piece we're going to get into is the holster. I'm running a Wyvern holster, and this gives me 7% crit damage. This isn't the perfect roll one. I wish I could get something else, but what I was shooting for here was 3 skill power rolls. So I have cooldown reduction, I have skill power, and then I have a utility mod. Now, if I could get something else that had 2 skill power rolls and a utility mod, I would use that instead, because I'm not really taking advantage of this crit hit damage. On this build, I only have 10% crit chance, so getting a different piece that would give me a different bonus might be more beneficial. Now, another talent you might want to try to get on here is if you get lucky enough. I don't even know if it's possible. If you get, say, 2 skill and even get devastating down there, that'll give you an additional 5% damage. Now, if we get into the knee pads, you're going to see I have Gilligard knee pads. And again, I have Gilligard because of the rolls. Look, I get 3 defensive rolls here. So I get that bonus armor, because I want to get my armor up there, right? You can either have health roll here or bonus armor. I prefer bonus armor. Then I get patience as my talent after being in cover for 3 seconds. Armor repairs for 5% every 1 second. This is getting a small nerf in the next patch. And then I get 2 defensive mods. So that's the real thing you're paying attention to. Those 3 defensive mods are going to get me up there to getting closer to getting that 11 defensive. I only get to 8 on this because that's what I was focusing for this build. I don't need to get to 11. I just need to get above 7. And then I have a defensive protocol mod that's going to give me health, and the one that's going to give me armor. So that's why I think that Gilligard has some of the best rolls that you need, especially when you're trying to get that 377, at least 377. And if you're really trying to go for 311.7, you're really going to need that Gilligard holster. Now for my gloves, if I had a different roll, if I had the perfect rolls, maybe I would use compensated instead of devastating. But I don't have the perfect rolls, and then the rolls I do have for compensated are on my LMG build, so I don't want to mess with that right now. I am running with the Providence defensive gloves. This gives me skill power and health because I'm running a 2-piece. The attributes, I have 7% assault rifle, and then I have health. And if you look at the compensated gloves, I have health and LMG damage. So I could switch this and put assault rifle on there, but I don't want to mess up these gloves because I only have 1 pair and I'm using them for my LMG build. So for my assault rifle build, I'm running with devastating instead, and I have some really high rolls. So if I was to switch this, I would have to drop down to 3 offensive, and then I would lose one of my mods. That's a gold mod that's giving me 5 assault rifle and 1 weapon damage, so 6% extra damage. So just have to play with the numbers and see what gives you a little bit more damage. Now if we get into the backpack, this is where it really gets interesting, and this is what makes the build. I'm running a Providence defense backpack. This is why I have 2 unlocked. I have the skill power health. I'm running health, bonus armor, and skill power, and I needed to run 2 blues and 1 skill to hit my numbers. Now on the ropes is what makes this build. Weapon damage is increased by 25% while all skills are on cooldown. That's a lot of damage. So the best way to get on cooldown, as you guys saw at the beginning, is either pop a pulse, let it go on cooldown, and every time you drop your heal, the chem launcher, it's going to put you on cooldown. And that is an easy way to get on the ropes active continuously over and over. Now I do have hearted on here. That's going to give me 10% armor, just like I told you on the chest. You want to have that 10% armor to get you closer to 250, 260. And then offensive skill mod, this is the one I was talking about. I have 5% assault rifle damage and 1% weapon damage. Now if I was to use those compensated gloves, I would have to drop this, so I would lose 6% damage here, and then I would gain 15% down below, but I'm also losing 5% from the glove, so I'm probably only going to gain 3 to 4% weapon damage, which that 4% could make a difference, right? So let's get into the skills and then show you what skills I run with this build, that way I can have on the ropes active. So once I get a couple rolls roll from cooldown reduction to skill power, I'll be able to unlock a heal that's a stronger heal. So this is how you guys improve your heals on your chem launchers, if you guys don't know. So if you set up your build right, you should have some pretty decent skill power that should be able to unlock ammo, which will push you at 7 chem launcher shots, and then of course you can unlock the heal. Now some guys, they'll run 2 healing mods, so I think you can probably run one that's like 31,000, 34,000, and your heal is going to be a lot better than if you didn't have any mods on there. But remember, every time your pulse is on cooldown and then you keep dropping a chem launcher, it will continue to trigger on the ropes, so you'll have that 25% weapon damage. And then pair that up with spotter, and that's going to be the pulse. And remember, this is getting a buff of 20%. Now I recommend putting radius on both slots, and that way you should be around 80 meters every time you pop your pulse, and that's pretty good. If you can see where the enemies are, you hit them for those 10 seconds. Once that goes on cooldown, you go from 20% damage to 25% damage. And then if we check out the stats, you're going to see my base weapon damage is 20,000, critical hit chance is 10%, critical hit damage is 32%, headshot damage is 67%, the range is 23, reload time is 2.2, accuracy and stability are both at 30%, and then we have assault rifle damage at 37%, and then all weapon damage at 6%. Now this build can be used the same way in PvE. My only recommendations for changes are add a little bit more damage to elites, because the damage is going to come from on the ropes, but if you have that damage to elites on there, you'll do a little bit more damage against those gold and named enemies. Now one thing about this build that I do like is I have 43% hazard protection, so that's against bleed, blind, burn, disorient, shock, disrupt, all that resistance is on there. So I'm almost at 50% resistance against all of that damage, which if you're using this build in the ODZ or in the dark zone, that's going to help out when you guys are farming those landmarks waiting to fight other players. But yeah, this is how I have my build. This is how I enjoy my build. I do still want to make some tweaks, and like I told you guys, it's not perfect. I don't believe anybody's build is 100% perfect unless you just gotten God rolls and got that RNG. But as of right now, I'm still trying to improve this build, to tweak it, to get a little bit more damage. But as of right now, this build does a lot of damage, and once they buff AR damage in the next patch, it's gonna work even better. If you guys have any questions on this build, let me know in the comment section. As always guys, if you don't see me in conflict, if you don't see me in the dark zone, it's only a matter of time. Nothing but skills out.